Welcome everybody to Go Local Live. It is 3 o'clock, maybe the best part of the day. We check in with Jennifer Lawless, political science professor at the University of Virginia. Professor Lawless, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Not much going on the federal level. I can't really think of anything. Elections, fights over things. Let's go to the big issue of yesterday. President Trump had a very dynamic, should we call it dynamic, press conference yesterday. He showed a video. He claimed that his administration has done a great job managing the coronavirus. He banned Chinese flights early on before there was even a single case in Rhode Island. What was your thoughts after seeing that press conference?
You know, I've been watching press conferences for a long time. I've been observing American politics for a long time, and I have never seen anything like I saw yesterday for a couple of reasons. First of all, this was a situation where the president decided to use the press room as a venue for a campaign rally. The kind of video that he aired was not an information video put out by the CDC that could be helpful for reporters. It was basically a campaign ad. It was the kind of thing that he would show supporters to suggest that he was winning this war and Democrats were causing him or helping him to lose it. And that was quite stunning because it was clearly political, and it was, a lot of people said that it was propaganda. I think that's an appropriate word, but it was also just completely stunning that he used the press room to do it. The second thing that struck me was that he said very explicitly that as president of the United States, he has the power to do whatever he wants. And if you ask any elementary school student who's learned about checks and balances or separation of powers or federalism, they know that that's not true. I'm not convinced that Donald Trump realizes that it's not true. And given this wartime footing that we seem to be on, that's a very scary prospect.
It was a very unusual press conference. It was, I think it shocked many of media analysts. John King, right afterwards, said it was the most shocking thing he had ever seen in the White House. By the way, a URI grad and a classmate of mine at URI. What was the take amongst Republicans in witnessing that?
I mean, I think they were excited to have a president who was clearly willing to play politics and make a case for himself as we head into the November election. I'm not convinced that any of them believe that the way that he spoke about the presidency is accurate or appropriate. I'm not convinced that if given the option, they would have said that this was the best venue. But I do think that they see in him somebody who's going to give Joe Biden a real run for his money and who's starting right now to make it very, very clear that he had this under control from day one, or at least that's the argument he's going to make, and that he alone saved hundreds of thousands of lives.
Governors on the West Coast, 3 Democratic governors, California, Oregon, and Washington, got together and had a very public announcement as to how they were going to handle the return to quote normalcy. On the East Coast, 5 governors, all Democrats, although later on in the day, Governor Baker from Massachusetts, a Republican, said he was going to join that coalition. So it wasn't just partisan politics per se. It did have some strange geographies to it. In Governor Hogan from Maryland, was also a Republican, was not included in that grouping. They said that they were going to work together in identifying sort of interstate commerce issues and when or when not to make revisions to their orders that are controlling lockdowns and such things. Did that exacerbate the partisanship, or was that them just saying, hey, listen, we're not going to be part of this silliness down in Washington?
I think it was the latter. Because although Governor Hogan is not part of this, he has been working closely with Muriel Bowser, who's the mayor of D.C., and Ralph Northam, the Democratic mayor of Virginia, to ensure that the Maryland, D.C., Virginia corridor is consistent in the messages that it's sending out too. So I think that what we really see are at least 3 pockets of governors or executive leaders of their cities coming together to say, look, the president can say and do whatever he wants, but we're trying to get this virus under control in our localities, and we're going to do everything we possibly can to not only slow the spread, but prevent it from a second wave that we're not capable of handling. And for Donald Trump, I think that probably led to part of the reason that he behaved the way that he did yesterday. But I think it also means that if these governors defy him and don't reopen the country according to his terms, there's really nothing he can do about it. And he's worried because that could ultimately cripple the economic recovery that he's banking on, not only for the country, but also for his own prospects in November.
Is this the biggest federal-state split since the early part of the civil rights, when the federal government went in and federalized National Guards, took over those troops, and forced integration at schools?
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of anything comparable to this. The other thing that's a little bit different about this is that although the president does control the national security issues and the public welfare of the nation, these governors do have substantial control over the economies of their state. And if they want to coordinate with one another regarding interstate commerce, that's not outside of their purview. They can't impose their will on another state, but they can certainly work with the chief executive of that state to come up with an agreement. And I think that's what's worrisome for Donald Trump.
The interstate commerce issue, though, does play both ways, right? If the national policy is that there's no blockages, nothing that is going to contain the transportation, and governors are still calling for lockdowns and 14-day quarantines, that could potentially be a legal showdown, correct?
It could be. It depends on exactly how the law is being used or not used. At the end of the day, the states and the states can't. There's the Supremacy Clause, which means that the federal government is supreme unless it's inconsistent with the Constitution. Here, that public welfare and maintaining the public welfare of the nation becomes relevant, and how that's interpreted becomes relevant, I think.
If there's ever a day for a showdown between states' rights and federal oversight, Donald Trump will find a way to do it before the November election.
No question.
Let's jump over to Joe Biden's big week that no one paid attention to. Bernie Sanders endorsed Joe Biden for president. It got fourth-tier media coverage, and then today, Barack Obama, not a huge surprise, but finally came out and endorsed Joe Biden. Is this painful for Joe Biden that he's teeing off these significant endorsements and they are not in the news cycle per se?
I don't think it matters that much for two reasons. The first is we are political junkies. A lot of your viewers are political junkies. Most Americans are not, and they're distracted right now. So being this far out from the election, being this far out from the conventions, we wouldn't be paying that much attention, or at least we wouldn't be retaining that much information about big political news anyway. The second reason I don't think it matters is because Joe Biden is the nominee. And from now on, every time that Donald Trump says something, Joe Biden will be responding. Joe Biden put out a statement this morning, and I think he tweeted last night right after the press conference that he actually respects the Constitution. He does not want to be king. He wants to be president. He wants to work with governors. He respects their views of their state. So we're entering the point right now where Biden and all of his surrogates will be very, very outspoken critics of Trump, and they'll spend a lot of time differentiating Biden from Trump. And overall, I think it's the accumulation of all of that information that's more important than, one big endorsement. The other thing to keep in mind, too, is that these endorsements don't have the kind of celebrity and sort of grandiose optics that they used to, because everybody's doing it from, their own den. So it's not like there was going to be a huge rally and nobody covered it. The Barack Obama tweet video was great, but he's sitting at his own desk.
Right. The convention's coming up at some point. No one's quite sure what its format will be. Will it be a giant Zoom with millions and millions of Democrats logged on? What possible way? The conventions in the early days were actually where presidents' nominees could potentially got picked. In this situation, the last few decades, we haven't had any brokered conventions for decades. What's this going to be, and will it have any momentum boost for Joe Biden?
I think that this is the convention. The main role of conventions now is to showcase the nominee and to drive up excitement and enthusiasm among the base. And so I think that could still potentially happen, even if it's virtual, in a sort of creative way. I don't know what that way would look like. But what it also does is, assuming that the conventions won't have the same kind of power that they typically do, that creates incentives for Biden to name a vice president sooner rather than later, to potentially start thinking about a transition team now, to begin thinking about who would occupy some of these other cabinet level positions, and do really hardcore vetting now so that he could announce them, quite soon. As a result, that sort of changes the independent power of the convention, but it will still be an important moment. That speech alone will still be covered, and it'll still sort of air more broadly, I think. I have a dog that's about to come into the picture.
Looking forward to that. Excellent, excellent. The other day we had a Skype with Italy, and a daughter joined the Skype as well. Let me ask you this. Much is being held out that vice presidential selection.
I'm putting you on hold. I'm sorry, this is totally unprofessional, but I have to let her out. 1 sec. Go ahead. Sorry.
That bulldog is now in the doghouse. But a lot's being made about who Joe Biden selects as vice president. Obviously, earlier in March, I want to say, he announced that his selection would be a woman. That now is being called into question at some levels. It's very hard for him to double back on that issue with the rise of Andrew Cuomo. Some folks are saying that this vice presidential pick is incredibly important because it needs to show vibrancy. A Democrat today was telling me that he's going to name somebody high energy. I said, I think he should pick somebody low energy so he looks like he has more energy. Is this a winning? If he picks a vibrant, high energy vice presidential partner, is this going to help him or potentially hurt him?
I'm one of these people that doesn't think the vice president makes that much of a difference. In the case of Biden, though, there could be an enthusiasm problem, because what Democrats are banking on is that visceral reactions among the base toward Trump will be enough to motivate people to get out for Biden, that it's not Biden himself that's driving people to the polls. So in this particular case, having a high energy, exciting, maybe somewhat younger vice presidential candidate could supplement the visceral reactions people have with some positive affect toward the ticket that would be a good recipe for success. That said, if he also names people like Kamala Harris, not as vice president, but makes her attorney general and makes it clear that that's his plan early on, a really vibrant, diverse, exciting cabinet could play an important role there too, because I think it's important that he signal that he's going to lead a new generation of politicians. And frankly, I thought that was the most important part of Barack Obama's endorsement, not just saying that he relied on Joe Biden to lead during his White House years, but also that he's who he would pick to lead for the next few years, because we're going into an unknown time and we need to look toward the future. And it's looking toward the future that people are concerned about. So if Biden wants to signal that he's got new voices at the table and new generations' views as part of his inner circle, then that youngness and that vibrancy would be certainly helpful.
There is an allegation. It's been kicking around. It was published on, I think, Sunday's New York Times. As you know, it's hard to remember which day is which in this.
There are no days
anymore. Right. This virtual reality coronavirus world we live in. But I think it was Sunday's New York Times, of a former staffer who alleges that Joe Biden sexually assaulted her. That got some play, certainly did not take over the news cycle. What is the play on that, and how much impact does that have during the course of the campaign?
Well, I think that this is not her first allegation. And so I think part of the reason it didn't get as much play as it may have is because it wasn't a new person. It wasn't somebody new coming out. It was a change in the severity of the allegations, but it was still the same person. Look, I think all of these incidents should be investigated. All of these allegations should be checked out. I felt that way when the person being accused is a Democrat or a Republican. I think most people feel that way. But we're also amid a presidential election, and the American people can walk and chew gum. And he's denied the allegation. And I think that, given everything that's going on, People are inclined to assume that he's going to be the nominee moving forward, that this will be handled. He's denied it in the past. He continues to deny it. And that unless there's new evidence, it's probably not going to have much in the way of legs.
Is Andrew Cuomo his biggest nightmare right now? Andrew Cuomo has these press conferences. They are tactical, they're smart, they're often inspiring, they're personal, they're authentic. It's shades of his father without the same allegations in the background that Mario Cuomo suffered from. Is that becoming a problem for Joe Biden?
I think that the answer to that question rests with Andrew Cuomo. If Andrew Cuomo decides that he wants to get out and be a very, very vocal surrogate for Joe Biden, I think it's all a plus. If he decides that he's going to steer clear of federal politics, with the exception of just saying, yeah, he's our nominee and we're excited about that, then I think it does open the door for a juxtaposition between Biden and Cuomo. And keep in mind, too, that Cuomo right now has a platform. Biden, as the presumptive nominee, will have an easier time now garnering coverage, but he's not in a position where he has any kind of authority or decision-making power. So, at this point, if people decide that they want somebody more like Andrew Cuomo, that doesn't necessarily help Joe Biden. But the Biden team knows that, and I'm sure they're going to They're going to try to work with Cuomo to ensure that that's not the case.
Cuomo's not shrinking, though. That group of East Coast governors was organized by Andrew Cuomo. He did not shy away from the spotlight. He's the one who put together that group and immediately got national press. It was the #2 story yesterday in the country.
Right.
And he seems to be at least kicking the can a little bit. Is that fair to say?
Oh, no question. And I think that he's very, very aware of the fact that he has the potential right now to be the alternative to Donald Trump in handling this pandemic and moving the country forward. And I think that if he has the choice to be the governor in the lead versus the governor not in the lead, he's going to choose to be the governor in the lead. I don't know that that's necessarily bad for Joe Biden. It seems to me that he, and frankly, most of the other governors right now, are really more interested in solving this crisis than playing politics. And so, I think, again, given the circumstances, it's not particularly damaging for Biden.
There was an election in Wisconsin this week. Wisconsin has been a very controversial state for a number of reasons, being a Republican battle with the teachers' unions a few years ago. And of course, Donald Trump edged out Hillary Clinton by 22,000 votes in 2016 to win that state, an upset for a Republican. What did that election mean this week?
Two things. First, Donald Trump and Republicans were petrified to call off that election or to delay it because they thought that they had a very good chance to win this state Supreme Court seat. And if there was a delay, if there were more absentee ballots, if there was extended voting, it would work to their detriment. So they actually put forward a plan that was implemented where people had to make a decision about whether to protect their health or to protect their right to vote. And people voted, and the liberal woman who was running against the Trump endorsee won that Supreme Court seat. And I think that bodes very well for the Democrats for November. It suggests that Trump does not have a stronghold on that state. It suggests that the petty politicking regarding the right to vote did not dissuade people from showing up at the polls. And it means that Donald Trump is certainly going to have to spend money and pour funds into Wisconsin. It's not like it's now a done deal for him just because he won it in 2016.
The Congress is going to have to deal with the president on a second very significant stimulus package. The $2.2 billion plan seems to go far short of what's necessary. The $349 million targeted for small businesses was functionally gone before it even began by major banks tying up with their major customers. How easy will that agreement be, and will it get just tied up in political fighting?
I mean, I think that I think it will get tied up, but I also think that Democrats and Republicans both know that they have no choice but to reach an agreement. I don't think that Steve Mnuchin likes spending his days with Nancy Pelosi. Probably he enjoys that as much as she likes spending her time with him. but both seem to be willing to move forward. Mitch McConnell also, at least for the last round, sucked it up, held his nose, and did what needed to be done. So my sense is that overall, that will likely be the outcome for the next package as well. But, it's it's daunting to think about moving beyond that, because we really don't know how long this is going to be. We don't know how many more of these packages we're going to need. And we don't know the extent to which unemployment is going to continue to climb. And so, one negotiation, one bill, okay, that works. Maybe we'll get two. I'm more concerned about rounds 3 and 4 and 5 and 6.
We're in Rhode Island. This really kicked off. The unemployment numbers exploded on March 8th. Yesterday, now more than a month into it, the number of new unemployment filings coupled with the gig worker filings was more than any other month in the history of the state of Rhode Island. More than 9,000 people filed yesterday. The total is now 211,000 folks unemployed or out of their gig position, for a workforce of 530,000 plus gig workers. We're at all-time record unemployment. Other states not as hard hit, but soon this is going to be a major crisis. Will the Fed continue to just print money to make sure that folks are eating and receiving unemployment benefits?
I think the answer to that question depends on what the CDC and what the medical experts tell us about the likelihood of getting this virus under control and what the second wave in the fall might look like. If this is a relatively short-term thing, then yeah, I think they're going to continue to do what they need to do to make sure that people can put food on the table and pick up prescription drugs and do everything else they need to do. If it's longer term, or if we're under the impression that we're going to face a similar set of circumstances in the fall, much like China is facing now, then I don't know what's going to happen. Because once you're talking about more than short-term emergency solutions, medium and long-term problems have politics built into them in a way that will, unfortunately, I think, make many Americans' lives more complicated and more, literally more people will be starving.
If you are a betting woman, do we have a traditional election in November, or do we have some form of online voting or mail ballots?
So my bet is that we will have a higher percentage of people with absentee ballots. We'll have fewer restrictions on what qualifies somebody to get an absentee ballot. We'll have longer periods of early voting, but I do think that the polls will be open and there will be in-person voting.
What didn't I ask you?
I think that the most interesting question for the next several days has to do with the future of Anthony Fauci. And Donald Trump yesterday and Fauci himself tried to make it clear that no, everything's fine, we're best friends. That Fire Fauci tweet that the president retweeted was just one of these things that he does because he likes to put out different views and be provocative. But we've seen this script before, and it always ends with the firing of the person. And so I'll be interested to see if Tony Fauci is still in that position by Friday.
Anthony Fauci, in a number of polls, is significantly higher, respected by Americans, over 70%. The president is running right now at about 48, 50%, according to a range of different polls. Jennifer Lawless, as always, thanks so much.
My pleasure.
It is. And I want to also thank you for the special guest star. It was not quite as good as that BBC episode where the little ones came running into the room and the poor wife came scrambling in. But I think it's going to meet one of our reels and could get spun off as a separate segment on GoLocal Live.
Right. When Viola wants to leave the room, Viola wants to leave the room.
We've all learned that lesson. Thanks so much. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Stay tuned for more news. It has been nonstop around the clock. Thanks, everybody. See you tomorrow.